Hello, welcome to the online launch of the 5th edition of the World Cities Culture Report. It's great to see so many of you joining us today. As well as our cities, we have people joining from Alexandria, Nairobi, Penang, Prague, Quito, Santo Domingo, Singapore, just to name a few. In fact, there's over 120 cities from around the world joining us today. Welcome, everyone. My name is Laia Gask. I'm the director of the World Cities Culture Forum. We are the leading network for culture and cities with nearly 50 cities across 6 continents. Together, we're building a world where culture is at the heart of thriving cities. We call it the golden thread, boosting the economy, connecting communities, sparking innovation, and making us healthier and happier. Our mission feels especially important right now. We are living in unprecedented times. Massive change in the geopolitical landscape, a climate crisis we cannot longer afford to ignore, and the rapid transformation of the way we work and connect with artificial intelligence. We live in a world that is unpredictable. And while national governments struggle, cities experiment and implement actionable change. That's why we work with mayors and deputy mayors, because they are change makers and innovators. And city networks are finding ways to get things done. Our cities learn from one another to scale and fast-track solutions that change people's lives. So where does culture fit into this picture, and how can you use the report? Well, the report shows how culture is responding to today's challenges. And you can use it in 3 ways. 1, you can get an overview of the global and the regional trends. Number 2, there's hundreds of case studies from cities to inspire you and your cities. And 3, it's the most comprehensive data set of culture in cities. So you can benchmark your city against others. So now I want to thank the team at World Cities Culture Forum, all our cities and our partners who have made the report possible. I hope you leave this session today feeling that culture is the catalyst that connects, inspires, and helps us build a better future. I now hand over to John Newbegin, Associate at World Cities Culture Forum and co-editor of the report, who will guide you through the key findings. Thank you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Laia, and welcome everybody, wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. As Laia said, there are participants from more than 120 cities all around the world on this call. So welcome. I had the honor of co-editing this report, and over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk you through some of the key elements of it. Then I'm going to talk to 3 of my colleagues, and finally, at the end of our hour, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if we could just go to the agenda, I'll show you what we're going to be doing over the next 60 minutes. After a brief introduction from me, as I say, I'll be talking to 3 of my colleagues about different aspects of the report and how it's playing out in practice. And then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see that if you want to ask a question, then there's a QR code at the bottom of the screen, or you can go to slido.com and use the code #456. The session is going to be in English, but if you do need translation, there are opportunities available at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So thanks for joining us. And for the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to talk you through some of the key elements of the online report. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So here we are. This is the last summit of the World Cities Culture Forum in Amsterdam last year. Representatives from more than 50 cities meeting together for 2 or 3 days to exchange ideas, to hear conversations, to discuss what we should be sharing with each other and how we learn from each other. And if we can go to the next slide, please. As well as us talking to each other, we're very dependent on information from other people. We represent 45 cities around the world. They all have detailed reports on what they've been doing over the last year in the report. This 5th edition is one that comes out every 3 years to update the way in which World Cities Culture Forum is progressing. It's growing in numbers, it's increasing in depth, and as more and more cities recognize the importance of culture in shaping their futures, our opportunities to engage with cities all around the world increases. One of the things we focused on in this report, as I'll be explaining to you, is data, because we live in a world in which data is increasingly important for analyzing what's happening, for lobbying for change, for enabling people to participate in the kind of changes that we want to make in our cities. So this report includes data collected on over 100 different indicators, which we've been developing in partnership with the OECD. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We work in partnership with other organizations. They include our supporters and partners who help us. So you will see there, SMU Data Arts will be coming to one of their representatives shortly, have helped with the data analysis. Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Itaú Cultural Foundation in Brazil, many of these other organizations that work with us to ensure that World Cities Culture Forum is recording what's really happening in cities and spreading the word to as many new cities as possible. So if we can go to the next slide, please. The kind of data that we've collected for the report is in extraordinary detail, which, as I say, draws across all 50 cities. More and more people are living in cities. It's now up to almost 70% of the world's population. That means that cities are increasingly the driving force, as Laia was saying. And for cities, it's also culture, which is the driving force of cities, in the same way that cities are becoming the driving force of economies and change around the world. And in the report, we've been collecting data which shows not just the extent of provision within cities, but the extent to which people are working in the culture and entertainment industries, how important they are for the future of our economies, and the extent to which there's a fusion between the kind of work and employment opportunities that culture generates and the quality of life in our cities, people's sense of emotional well-being. So a great deal of data. If you look at the report online, you'll be able to trawl through it for yourselves. And if we can go to the next slide, please. At the time of our last report, the world was just coming out of the COVID pandemic. And if there was ever an opportunity to understand the real value and importance of culture, it was then, when all live events came to a halt. And I think all of us realized how culture is key to our social and individual well-being. The interesting thing to be able to report in our 2025 report is that culture has really bounced back around the world. There's significant increase in the number of theaters, in the number of live music events, in people's participation in cultural activities. But it's also quite fragile. There's a long way to go. The damage that the pandemic caused to live events and to institutions that depend on people attending in real life has been enormous, and we're slowly building back. But it is doing much better than we might have anticipated. And there's a clear indication that there's real growth in people's engagement and activities in cultural activities all across our members. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And this shows again, if you look at the report, great deals of data, not just in terms of the kind of organizations that are providing cultural provision for their citizens in terms of museums, clubs, galleries, cinemas, theaters, but the proportion of people that's engaging with them. And as we collect data, we're able to understand much more closely why people do what they do, how they do what they do, what more of what they want. And this enables us to plan, enables all cities to plan the way in which their cultural provision is going to play out in the future in much greater detail. And it also means that people have an opportunity to participate in the way cultural decisions are made. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Here again, the extent of higher education and library provision, museums and galleries. So we've tried to record all the kind of cultural activities and facilities that a city needs for a dynamic, active public life, from, if you like, the more serious and intellectual pursuits through to what people do with their leisure time, clubs, pubs, bars, and open spaces. Again, if you look through the report, you'll see there's a great deal of information, a great deal of detail that enables us to build up a much, much closer picture of how people's behavior is changing in cities all around the world. And if we could go to the next slide, please. As well as the data that we've recorded in the report, we asked the member cities, what are the key policy issues that are confronting them as they move forward? And there are 8 very, very clear areas where nearly every city of the members is engaged in one way or another with thinking about policies for the future. And I'm just going to very quickly go through them. If we could have the next slide, please. So as cities become more and more intensely built up, as you will all know, prices go up. It means that arts provision gets squeezed. Artists and studios and galleries in the middle of a city are likely to get squeezed out. What we're doing is working with cities to develop ways of resisting that. One great example is the Creative Land Trust idea, which was started by one of our member cities, San Francisco, is now spread to 10 or 12 cities, independent trust that enables artists and creative makers to enjoy security of tenure for a long time in their facilities, whatever's happening to prices roundabout. But you'll see from this slide, 94% of cities are actively protecting their creative workspace, because without that, the quality of life in a city center diminishes. And if we can go to the next slide, please. This is also true of what's happening with climate. 82% of our member cities are concerned about the fact that climate and climate change is impacting on the physical fabric and the emotional fabric of their cities. This includes thinking about how we mitigate the impact of climate change by good environment policies, but also how we adapt to the fact that whether we like it or not, extreme temperatures, floods, droughts are going to become part of our daily lives. And in urban settings, we have to be working together to think through how we're going to tackle these issues and share best practice with each other. So the next slide, please. And another area where, again, as you'll see from this slide, almost 100% of our member cities are thinking about what happens in their nighttime economy. It's becoming hugely important. And as well as the quality of provision, there are so many issues which a nighttime economy raises around security, around noise, around transport, around ease of access, around pay, because the nighttime economy is fraught with all kinds of employment difficulties for people. And what some people want to do in the evening is party and make a noise. What other people want to do is the very opposite. So thinking through how cities can deal with the range of interests that their citizens have and mean that we all enjoy the nighttime life of our cities as much as the daytime is important. So the next slide, please. And then another area which, of course, is of huge concern to city administrations everywhere is what happens with young people and the kind of educational opportunities they have, not just in the classroom, but outside. So 2 examples here. In Seoul, in South Korea, a huge program to encourage young people to start reading more has been enormously successful. And in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, a culture pass has enabled many, many young people from some of the poorer parts of the city to enjoy all kinds of cultural activity, from cinema, theaters, galleries, even to book reading and exchanging ideas of that kind. So again, sharing ideas about how we can improve provision and educational stimulus for young people is an important part of what we do. And the next slide, please. So other policy areas that we touched on in the report that are of concern to our member cities and are of concern to just about any city anywhere in the world are the health and well-being of people, the quality of public realm, the physical space, how safe it feels, how beautiful it feels, how easy it feels for people to access it. And then thirdly, of course, the impact of AI and technology on the way cities are running, the way citizens are engaging with their cities. And then finally, tourism, because tourism is now probably the fastest growing industry in the world, and it's a huge benefit to many cities, but it's also becoming a problem because successful tourism can begin to kill the very thing that people have come to enjoy. And some cities are already finding that they have to think very carefully about how they balance the benefits of tourism with the disadvantages of tourism. So that's one of the things which, again, we're exchanging ideas, and there's a good deal in the report about some of the best ideas that are emerging on how to deal with this issue of growing tourism, but not allowing it to get out of hand. And if we could go to the next slide, please. Another issue which we've addressed in the report is what's happening in different parts of the world. And from this slide, you can see there's many more than 50 dots on this slide, because in the course of preparing this report, we collaborated with many organizations around the world and to see what's going on in a wider range of cities than just the few 50 member cities. And in particular, we looked in great detail at what happened in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, and we're indebted to a wonderful organization called Andani Africa, which is one of the leading cultural analysis and data research organizations in Africa, exploring what's happening in different cities in sub-Saharan Africa and how that is changing what's happening on the continent. And then similarly, we had a piece of work which we did with an organization called UTSI, which is the Council of Ibero-American Capital Cities that's spread right across the Atlantic from Spain and Portugal to Latin America, thinking about what's going on in the cities of Latin America. And in particular, in Africa, one of the things which is becoming very clear is that the way cultural policy is developing in Africa and in Latin America is very different and very distinctive. In Africa, a huge amount of the energy is coming from young people. It's not coming necessarily from city administrations. It's coming from the grassroots. It's people who are entrepreneurs, who are engaging in new kinds of activity, creating new trends, from filmmaking, from fashion and music, from festivals. All these areas of cultural activity are burgeoning in the cities of sub-Saharan Africa that are growing at a phenomenal rate. They're young cities, they're changing fast. And because World Cities Culture Forum really is a global organization, we're thinking hard about how we learn from this new kind of cultural energy that is emerging in Africa. And similarly, in Latin America, it's a different kind of cultural energy that's coming up from the grassroots. How do we make sure that all this energy and activity feeds into successful, sustainable, productive policies that city administrations can adopt, where we can all learn from each other and improve the quality of what we're able to offer? So if we could go to the next slide, please. One of the things which we've been focusing on, as I've tried to stress, is the importance of data. And there are so many data tools now that enable us to understand better what's going on in cities, not just in terms of the quantity, but the quality of provision. And we've tried to focus, as we say here in this slide, to measure what is of real value rather than just what's easily measured. So it's relatively easy to say how many museums or how many libraries or how many theaters a city has, but how are they used? What's people's response to them? How accessible do they feel? What's the visibility to the general public? And can we use this data to encourage citizens to help us think through and plan the future of cities so that the cultural provision that's being developed is genuinely in response to what citizens want? The other thing is that the way social media works means that people change their habits very, very quickly. Someone said to me the other day, you can't plan a tourism policy without understanding what's going on Instagram. So for cities to be able to respond quickly and speedily to what people want, where people are moving next, is very important. And in all that, data is hugely significant in how we think about the future. And to facilitate the increasing intensity of the way we use data in all cities, but particularly in our member cities, we've developed, if you like, a little data scheme, which we'll see on the next slide. If we could go to the next slide, please. So using the word creative, we've identified 8 different areas where we're collecting data. You'll see say related sectors, that means tourism, nightlife, restaurants, and so on. So we've broken it down into a series of different indicators, which together and across the whole piece explain what is really happening in some detail in a city administration and try to capture the full value of all the data to which we have access. And we're going to hear more about this in a minute from one of my colleagues, but if we could go to the next slide, please. And that is, what's new about this report is it is the first time we've done a digital edition for World Cities Culture Forum. It means that it's easy for people to access, and there's a huge amount of data in it. So one of the ideas that we've developed is to have what we've called an interactive data explorer, so that when you go online and look at what is in the report, you can analyze it, disentangle it, use it, focus it for what is most useful for your purposes. So as we go forward towards our next report, we're going to be thinking more about how we use data and data analytics to make sure that culture is properly understood in the wider context of city provision, how it fits in with other areas of city administration, and how it's a benefit to people who are engaged not just in the cultural world, but in every aspect of a city's life, and how we share that information with each other so that we all can improve the quality of provision that we have. And now, if I'm going to go on to ask two of my colleagues some questions about how they see the data and the kind of information we have in the report impacting on their daily lives and on their professional work. And my first guest is Bronwyn Malden from Los Angeles. Welcome, Bronwyn. You're the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture Data Valuation Chief. And so you represent a county, not a city. I think that's quite interesting because as cities grow all around the world, we know that they're bursting out of their boundaries. And what we think of as traditional cities often doesn't really capture the extent of an area in which people live and travel to work. So just quickly, tell us briefly what the LA County is, what it represents, how many people it represents, how big an area it represents.
Great. It's great to be here. So Los Angeles County, it is geographically about 4,000 square miles, that roughly 10,000 square kilometers. We have some of the most densely populated neighborhoods in the United States within LA County, but we also have two large mountain ranges, the high desert, beautiful beaches, busy ports, all within the county. 10 million people. The county government serves all 10 million residents of LA County. About almost 4 million of them live within the city of Los Angeles, which is what most folks think of when they think about Los Angeles. LA County, our 10 million people, about 25% of us are white, and about half of the population here in Los Angeles is Latinx. So our diversity is something that we embrace in Los Angeles. Within the city, in addition to the city of LA, there are 87 other cities within the county and unincorporated areas as well, and we serve them all.
So this is an issue which many cities are confronting, isn't it? What we traditionally think of as Los Angeles as a city is only one. It's not even half the whole extent of the, if you like, of the whole metropolis. So tell me, Bronwyn, I do remember once having a conversation with you, and you were saying that your use of data, because that's your area of expertise, it's relatively easy to explain to colleagues in other part of the county and city administration of the value of culture, but sometimes it's not so easy to persuade them of the fact that culture needs a good budget, just like any other bit of the city administration. I think we're all used to the fact that the culture budget is usually the last one that gets resolved in the city. So what are you doing to tackle that? How are you challenging that in Los Angeles?
You know, Los Angeles County is one of the few counties in the United States that has a formal cultural policy as part of our municipal code. And that policy states that all departments of county government are responsible for helping to ensure that all residents have access to arts and culture. So it's not just Department of Arts and Culture, but it's Animal Care and Control and the Sheriff's Department and Beaches and Harbors and all the other departments. This was not a hard sell to the leaders of other county departments. I think that people in Los Angeles, maybe it's because the entertainment industry is such a big part of our economy. Maybe it's our beautiful weather, it's our diversity, but everyone understands that culture, arts and culture are critical to health, mental health, quality of life, positive impacts on education. But as you say, getting the dollars behind that is a lot harder. A lot of departments of a little bit of an oversimplification, but a lot of departments of county government, when they use the arts, they have standalone programs that may be funded by outside grants. And what we really are working with them to do is to ensure that they are bringing arts into kind of operations. And one of the best ways we have to do that is through a program, our Creative Strategist program, where we place artists in residence in county government. So we take artists, risk takers, people who bring in all sorts of new ideas of how to work side by side with county bureaucrats, not so much risk takers, to bring those concepts, those ideas, those ways that artists work. This program has been wildly successful. We have departments now that are starting to, we fund those. We can only fund 1 or 2 a year, but we now have departments who are finding budget to keep their creative strategist on board. They're coming back to us asking, can we help them get their own strategists and their own artists in residence that they can fund. So it's really, we have the data. We can make the arguments about health and well-being and educational outcomes, but it is that on the ground working side by side with artists where people really experience and understand what artists can bring to the table.
Wow, well, that's a fantastic initiative, and the fact that it's been successful means it's the kind of thing that other people can be learning from. But you just talked there about thinking about things at the grassroots, and I know that one of the areas that you've also been thinking about is if data is going to serve the needs of the city and serve the needs of the culture department, the data also has to be coming from ground level, if you like. And I know that one of the things that you do in the LA County is you have an annual datathon where you draw in people from arts and cultural organizations at community level and, if you like, encourage them to collect their own data and to feed data through to you. I mean, that sounds like that's how you really build a solid, robust database and keep it simple and keep it at a level that people understand. So tell us a little bit more about how you set that up and what its benefits are.
So the Arts Datathon is an annual event that my research and evaluation team runs every year, but we've been doing it since 2017. And we bring together the arts and culture community to explore how can we use data to improve access to the arts for everyone. And the folks who come, it's not the data geeks that are coming, and it is arts administrators, folks who are working in theaters and galleries, and the musicians. We've got teaching artists, educators. Those are the folks that we're bringing together to really talk and explore how data is used, what kinds of data that we should be collecting. We have a theme every year. One year we focused entirely on metadata and helping folks understand how structuring data sets can help them and the data sets around their assets can help them manage their programs more effectively. Last year, our theme was artificial intelligence. And we brought in folks to do breakout sessions, both to teach how to use AI tools, but also sessions on the ethics and social justice issues around how AI, large language models, are being developed. Every year at the end of the Datathon, we have a kind of a plenary session where everyone comes back. And what is fascinating, we've been helping them build skills and knowledge, but then we hear back from them. What did they learn? What did they get out of this? And people talking about, their interpretation. And it really is a reminder to us who work in data how the real world works and what are the real concerns at the grassroots level. So this is every year a learning opportunity for us as well. I want to tell you also, this coming April, we're going to have another Datathon. Our theme this year is how do we build and maintain knowledge at a time when facts and reality are under attack. We feel like helping our arts community understand and how they can protect data, protect their own data, but also in their data practices, collection, analysis practices, how can they protect the communities that they are serving? So I'm really looking forward to this year's Datathon and hearing back from the communities.
Well, thank you. That is super interesting because I think for many people, it feels like collecting data is a bit of an academic exercise, and it's sort of what the guys at the head office do. It's not what really makes a difference on the ground. So the fact you're encouraging people to think about data and to use data and also to disentangle what's true from what's not true is incredibly important. So thank you. Again, that's a really great tip for others to think about and share. And then finally, I want to ask you about something very different, which is, I was mentioning earlier about the fact that cities are all having to adapt to climate change, and sometimes it's extreme temperatures, it's floods, it's droughts. But as many people know, in your case, it was absolutely uncontrollable wildfires. And I know that one of the things that you've been thinking about in your department is what's the role of culture when some catastrophe like driven catastrophe, when people are thinking about how you rebuild the physical infrastructure of the city, it's the role of the culture team to think about how do you get back to normal? How do you make people feel that the world is getting back to normal? How do you make people reconnect with a sense of well-being and community? So tell us a little bit about how you and your team responded to the terrible wildfires you had last summer.
Yeah, an absolute tragedy for Los Angeles. But when in moments of crisis, like the wildfires, the COVID pandemic, it's kind of nice to be working in local government because it's very clear the Department of Public Health, the fire department, they have very clear roles to play on the front lines. And in arts and culture, we have our role is very clear to us as well. And it is that support behind the scenes in the midst of the crisis. You know, we do work that helps to ensure that our colleagues in those frontline departments can do their work. We are also critically a conduit for information from government to the arts and culture community. What resources are available? We're also outreaching to the philanthropic community. Colleagues around the country were providing resources to us at the height of and following the wildfires, sharing that information with the communities that we serve. My research and evaluation team, we were actively collecting data. We conducted surveys, but also reached out to other colleagues who were collecting their own data and trying to kind of make sense of what we were learning so that we could take that information and make sure the arts and culture concerns, issues, the realities on the ground were front and center with policymakers as they are making policy, determining how resources are distributed. And that's absolutely critical. So one of the things, so when our arts and culture communities in those crises, our colleagues are reaching out, we had, are lending a hand, providing support, and we're making sure that that is visible, that the work they're doing to rebuild after wildfires, to provide support, arts education in communities, conservation resources. We want to make sure that's all available and visible to our authorizers and to the public.
Okay, well, Bronwyn, thank you. That's really fascinating. We're going to have to leave it there, but I'm sure people may well have questions they want to ask you when we get to our question and answer session shortly. So thank you for that. And I'm now going to talk to Jen Benowit-Bryan, who's the director of SMU Data Arts. And Jen, SMU Data Arts has been invaluable to World Cities Culture Forum in preparing this fifth report. So tell us a little bit about SMU Data Arts, what you do and why you do it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. So Data Arts is a university-based arts research center in the United States. And what we really focus on is providing data-driven insights to the arts and culture sector, including the leaders of arts organizations, funders, foundations, and city arts agencies to help them make more informed decisions. And we were introduced to the World Cities Culture Forum through our colleagues at Bloomberg Associates. Thank you to them. And we were really delighted to support this project through data integration and analysis because it fits so squarely into that mission and purpose that we have as an organization. For us, it's been an amazing opportunity to think beyond the US context and apply that expertise to cultural policy questions on a global scale.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And let's go right back to first principles and tell us why you think it's important for cities to collect data about their cultural activity.
Yeah, it's really difficult to create change, meaningful change, without being able to measure or understand what's happening on the ground, which I think you shared really eloquently, John, in your introduction to this discussion. Even with strong policies or adequate budgets in place, we just don't know what might be working and what's not without that data behind it. So collecting information really helps city arts leaders think about their internal strategies, refine them, and also advocate for additional city resources to support their arts ecosystem. They can also help by leveraging data to talk about their impact as an arts agency on their city and the impact of their arts ecosystem on their community. And WCCF data, I think, is really unique in that it offers such valuable opportunities to contextualize data with comparisons to other cities and to look at change over time. And those two kinds of dimensions of comparison are so valuable in understanding where we are relative to others and where we've been. And what is the direction of momentum that we're kind of managing as arts organizations. That can also really help identify peers who a city could learn from, who might be excelling in a key area, and potential partners who might be interested in working collaboratively around a shared area of opportunity. And when I was at the Amsterdam convening of WCCF, I saw that in action, where city leaders were really connecting to both share what was working in their cities and what they'd learned, but also to collaborate and connect around topics that they wanted to advance or make change on.
Sure. Well, I've always been a big believer. You can't have good policies without good data. So they absolutely hang together. So let me just come to another question. And that is that data collecting costs money, and many city culture departments don't have very much money. So it's a tough gig, if you like, to collect the data that's needed. But I know that one of the things that you've talked about is the fact that there's lots of freely available data, not necessarily collected by a culture department, that is out there anyway in the public sphere that can be used by culture teams to construct the kind of information that they need for good policy. So very briefly, because we're a bit short on time, just tell us how you think cities can access some of this data freely and use it most effectively for themselves.
Well, I know that Ali will be demoing the Data Explorer tool, and that is a place where I would suggest that city leaders start in thinking about what information might be available in peer cities that they could reference or think of as roadmaps. But beyond that, we found that the United Nations maintains a comprehensive data portal. Not every city is covered for every year, but it's been a really valuable resource. And I'll provide some links in the chat to these resources too. Cities can also explore the OECD local data portal, which includes a really wide range of valuable contextual indicators related to things like population and housing, transportation, and other urban characteristics. And the UNESCO Creative Cities reporting is also a helpful source of inspiration for how cultural data is being captured and shared in different contexts and regions around the world. So I'm happy to share those links in the chat in case people haven't yet been able to leverage or look at those as resources.
Okay, thank you. So that's a great tip. People can find more information about that in the chat. And I would just say in the report itself, there's a section on the methodology that's been used by World Cities Culture Forum to collect data. And you might find that very useful to look at as well. Jen, I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there because we're running short on time, but thank you for that. That's really useful. Thanks for anything you put up in the chat. And I'm now going to turn to my colleague, Ali Lester, who's going to talk about the Data Explorer, which is part of this online launch of the report and how that works and how you can use it. Ali, over to you.
Thanks so much, John, and thank you, Jen, also for the plug there of the Data Explorer, which I'm going to talk you through. So I'm Ali, Senior Research Officer at World Cities Culture Forum, and I'm so happy to be joining the webinar today to share that for the first time ever, the World Cities Culture Report is available in a new digital format. So you'll find this on our website in the report section on the main navigation of our homepage. So look for this distinctive red and orange font that you can see on the screen now. The digital report is fully interactive, so you can move between sections and find what matters most to you. So again, you'll see the toolbar there with all the different sections of the report broken down. And the digital report is really about making our report more accessible, which John's already mentioned, and turning data and policy into insights and ideas that can inspire action. And if you want to go further, you can explore the full data set behind the report in our new Data Explorer tool, which Jen just mentioned there. So the Data Explorer is designed to help you dig deeper into the numbers behind the report. And I'll just wait a second because my screen recording should be catching up with me shortly. And you'll be able to see where that is on the toolbar. But basically, our Data Explorer, it lets you explore cultural data from across the global network and search, compare, and visualize the city data in more detail, and really just find insights that can inspire new ideas and policies. It's built from data sets that are shared by our cities and organized under our creative data framework. I'm just going to pause and just check that the video is playing, because I'm sort of gone a little bit too quickly maybe. If we could jump to around 45 seconds of the video, please, and then we can go to the Data Explorer section. Sorry, bear with us. We have the screen recording that's going, hasn't quite caught up with me. But essentially, as I said, oh, here you go. So the creative data framework, you see here? Oh, there we go. So you can see here, this is where you access the creative data framework. This is actually the city data now. I'm going to talk through it. So our creative data framework that John has showed on some of his slides has 8 categories that capture everything from infrastructure and heritage to access, talent, and cultural investment. And something that kind of we acknowledge through the data collection is that some cities have more data than others. But this really reflects the diversity of how cities collect and use cultural data today. And really, this is just a foundation of building a consistent global data set over time. And there are many, many different ways to use it. So you'll see here, the different sections of the creative framework here. So you can research all sorts of aspects of a city's cultural infrastructure, for example. So you might want to see how many museums exist in the city. And from just a quick search, you can see all the data in one place. So here you go. So you can see how many museums exist across a global city. And you can see when it was collected and where it came from, all in one place. And if you want to show that story as well in your presentation or report, you can instantly turn the data into cards or graphs or even a map, so you can make your case more visual and compelling. And you can also filter the data by region as well. And if you need the raw data or more information on sources, that's also available, and you can download it in the spreadsheet to dig even deeper and share this with your team. You can also explore policies. So for example, you can see which cities have developed nighttime economy strategies. And it's a simple way to see which cities are already working on specific cultural policies. Alternatively, so you've got kind of the perspective from the creative framework, but you can also go and focus in on a single city. So these are all the cities across the network, and you can view the data from those specific cities. So you can see the data set across, again, those 8 creative categories. So you'll see the example from Amsterdam on the screen here. So again, you can kind of really, really zoom in at a city level and see what's going on in their creative sector. The goal of the Data Explorer and the digital report is simple, and that is to make the cultural data more accessible, comparable, and usable, and really as a way to kind of share ideas and benchmark progress and really strengthen the case for culture worldwide. This is a new tool for this edition of the report, so this is very much just the beginning of this journey, and we're going to continue to develop this tool based on feedback from our users and also our cities. So please go and use it, enjoy it. We're going to drop the link to the Data Explorer in the chat, and there's loads of data to have fun with, so yeah, please go and enjoy it. So that is wraps up kind of the main part of the program for the webinar, and we're now going to move on to our live Q&A. So I'd like to bring kind of John, Bronwyn and Jen back into the room. Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, we're going to jump into the kind of live audience Q&A now. We've had lots of questions submitted from registrants from all over the world when they registered for the webinar. So we're going to kick off with a couple of those questions first, and then we're going to go to some of the live audience questions as well that have come through on the Slido. So we've spoken a lot about data, so don't want to kind of go into this too much, but I think something that's really interesting is, John touched on it earlier on the power of data. We worked really closely with OECD to develop the data indicators as part of our framework, how that led to the creative data framework kind of development from the World Cities Culture Forum side. And Jen also kind of discussed the importance of kind of collecting data at a city culture team level as well. But maybe, Bronwyn, I want to touch maybe on just like your experience of that from the LA County kind of experience of submitting that data and what that was like and kind of what the process was involved with that.
Oh, you bet. So Los Angeles County has been contributing data to World Culture Report since 2013, and it has been a very robust process every year and only has gotten more so with the partnership with OECD. And I think that one of the most interesting things has been that every time we go through the process, there's this top-down, bottom-up kind of, are we going to get the data from a national data source or a statewide data source? Or is this something we need to go to our communities and find a way to gather the data? And that challenge, figuring out which data source has the right data, the best data, and the most representative of the communities we serve. Being part of an OECD process is great because now, being able to compare ourselves internationally, not just nationally, is also fantastic.
Amazing. Thanks. Thank you, Bronwyn. I'm going to move on to the next question because I'm conscious of time, and I know we've had loads of questions that have come through, and we spent quite a lot of time talking about kind of the data and the process around that. So I'm going to take more of kind of the regional perspective now that John touched on in the opening presentation. And looking to, within the report, we've got our Focus on Africa chapter. And we've actually had a question come through from Andani Africa, who were our partners on the Africa Alternatives research. So that research found that a third of cities studied have developed their own cultural policies despite limited national frameworks. And this is referred to in the report as African alternatives to traditional cultural governance. And John, I'm going to come to you and ask kind of what opportunities do you see in this bottom-up city-led approach to cultural development, and how might it reshape global conversations about cultural policy? And really, how can kind of policymakers and funders support what's going on the ground, and sort of what makes these approaches that we see in the research from Andani Africa and these African alternatives relevant for cities worldwide and cities in the World Cities Culture Forum network?
Well, thanks, Ali. I think, so, in many parts of the world, we struggle to talk about citizen engagement in cultural policy. The interesting thing that's happening in African cities is it's all about citizen engagement. It's citizen driven. And one of the things which comes across really strongly in that Andani report, which I think is absolutely excellent piece of work, is that it's young people, often with nothing much in the way of resource, who are making the culture happen, whether it's music, whether it's fashion, whether it's film, whether it's festivals. It's by young people, and it's being driven by them not just because they're interested in the arts and culture, but they've got to make a living. So there's a strong commercial and economic element to it. And many cities, I mean, in many cities in Africa, the average age of the population is 18, 19. It's a hugely young population. And I think we've got a lot to learn from the kind of energy that young people bring. For them, it's not kind of art here and economy there. They're absolutely interwoven. It's about shaping their cities that are growing fast. And it's about bringing all that kind of energy of young people, of real creative energy, which is looking for commercial outlets as well as cultural outlets that we've got to learn from. I think the interesting thing in Africa is going to be how to move from, if you like, this very, very grassroots, bottom-up cultural energy to make that more, if you like, systemic as it emerges. Because, of course, along with all that arts and cultural energy, there's the big corporations moving in to hoover up the rights that people are generating. So making sure that it stays under the control of citizens and doesn't become the property of big transnational entertainment corporations, that's going to be an important issue. And that's another area where I think we can all work together globally, because that's an issue for artists everywhere. Who owns the stuff that they create? Very often it's a bunch of big platforms, many of them based in Silicon Valley. So these are challenges that we all face, but we're seeing the cutting edge of it in Africa. And I think the Andani report reflects that wonderfully.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so much to learn. I think the insights from the regions, in the report, we kind of go into different regional trends, but specifically in kind of the Focus on Africa report and the Focus on Latin America chapter of the report, there's so much to learn from those regions for cities across the world. So I think really, really, really great thing to think about and kind of consider for cities everywhere. Another question that has come in, and it's actually something that came in on many of the registrations as well, but kind of an emerging theme is around sort of support for creatives in cities. So I know that we have a lot of creative practitioners and artists on the call, and one of the questions was around sort of like the viability of artist careers really in cities today. So the question that's come in was sort of like, what emerging or needed roles or positions could benefit from community organizers and builders, and how are cities supporting creatives and small organizations? So maybe Bronwyn, could you come in on that, maybe from a city level? And then Jen, maybe if you have any data around sort of maybe some interesting, or what you're seeing kind of in cities around sort of support for creatives and artists as well, maybe from your perspective, that would be interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, I think about in Los Angeles, one of the things we think about is the relationship between the nonprofit arts sector and the entertainment industry, because it's such a huge part of our economy. And while they function very differently, and as John was just saying about the huge transnational entertainment companies versus a small community-based organization, very often it's the same people who may have a day job in entertainment industry and also do their avant-garde theater at night, or their, performing arts things that they do. But they are all part of this kind of whole sector and part of our whole community. So when we think about providing, we think a lot about young people and who has access to those jobs in the entertainment industry. And we are developing programs and have programs to help young people understand that there are careers in entertainment that would also allow you to stay engaged in that kind of wonderful, that stuff that's really close to your heart. But you can also make a living working in the entertainment industry. A lot of it has to do also with convincing parents that there's actually a career in that exciting thing that your kid is really interested in. But helping, a lot of what we focus on is ensuring that folks who haven't historically had access to those kinds of jobs in the entertainment industry do have access. What are the on-ramps for them?
Thank you, Bronwyn. And are there any additional comments, Jen, from your side?
Yeah, I would just share that there's a lot of documentation of how challenging it's been to have a stable career and creative work across lots of city and regional contexts. And what we're seeing emerging out of COVID is that that's become even more precarious for artists, for the creative workforce. There's a new study that was just released in the US recently that's a national study of artists done by NORC and the Mellon Foundation. And it really shows, I think, the implications of that precarity for artists nationally, that more than half, 57%, reported being somewhat or very worried about at least one form of major financial vulnerability. So food, housing, medical care, utilities, and more than a fifth of the artists that they talked to were concerned about having enough to eat. And that is not, obviously, that is not a sustainable situation for artists to be in. And I think it's interesting in the WCCF data to see how many cities are thinking about kind of affordable workspace as one of the ways to think about, how you can support artists as a city arts agency. And I'd argue that that's like such an important step in that direction, that there's more work to be done in that space.
Can I just add to that? I think one of the issues here is that there are some things that you can do at city level, and providing affordable workspace, creative enterprise zones, exhibitions, festivals where people get a chance to show their work, showcase their work. That's the kind of stuff that can happen at city level. But an awful lot of this really needs to be at national government level. It's about social protection and pensions. And interestingly, you know, in Jamaica, they're just exploring an idea where for artists to have a kind of special kind of insurance scheme, because they recognize that so many artists, when their earning capacity changes from season to season, it's very, very uncertain. So there are initiatives that national governments can play in, and I think that's an area that's perhaps more important than city government in this question of sustaining livelihoods. But there are things that cities can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, Jen, your point about creative workspaces, that's one of the key kind of policy areas in the report. And there's so many brilliant case studies of what cities are doing all across the world to kind of support creators and workspaces and access to that. So go to the report if you want to learn a little bit more about what cities are doing in that space. I think we've probably got time for one more question. It's something that, I mean, there's been many questions that come in. It's hard to have time for them all. And if you have any other kind of pressing questions that we don't get around to answering them, please feel free to kind of send them over to us, and we will do our best to get back to you on those. But I think one thing that Laia touched on in that intro video and is front of mind for so many people is, you know, all the changes and shifts that are going on in the world right now in geopolitics, climate, AI technology. And again, lots of questions came through around this. So really kind of amongst all this change, this is a question for anyone who would like to kind of answer it, is really like, what are the opportunities, what are the positives for innovating in this space, and kind of how cities can define or measure and sustain culture and creativity?
Well,
thanks, John.
Very quickly, I think this is an area where cities, more than national governments, are really making the running. One of the things that struck me at the World Cities Culture Forum Summit in Amsterdam is all the cities there are eager to share and support each other. There's a real kind of solidarity. How are we going to deal with environment and climate change? How are we going to deal with the fact that there's lots of emotional stress and mental health problems in our cities? How are we going to deal with the fact that people want quality jobs? These are real issues that are common across all cities. And I think it's cities, not countries, that are now providing the global leadership. And that's why for cities to work together all around the world is really, really more crucial now than it's ever been before. They're the change makers, and they're the ones that are really setting out plans for the future. And that's true of cities in every continent of the world. The great thing about World Cities Culture Forum is it's becoming more and more global, and it really does show how all the cities around the world are all dealing with the same issues and all wanting to share. They don't want to start wars with each other and slap tariffs on each other. They want to get on and work together.
So true. Yeah. Jan, Bronwyn, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? Or?
I'll just say that we're thinking of the arts increasingly as so intersectional with lots of other areas of policy. And I think that's been a trend for a while, but it feels like we're leaning more and more into that. How does the arts fit into so many of these other spaces? And city departments cover many of those dimensions: economic development, transportation, housing, tourism, where the arts have such a critical role. And so when I think about kind of innovative practices, I think about real collaborations that are happening at the city level across departments, within departments, to really acknowledge and start to track and measure the importance of the arts to those broader conversations, as well as their value intrinsically for communities.
And I would just add yes to everything John and Jen just said. Come talk to us as the official government representative here. We are open. We want to learn from you. Let's work together, because the problems are so large and we can work together to solve them.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bronwyn. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, John. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up the Q&A. And I'm going to hand back up to John now, just for some closing remarks.
Okay, Ali, Jen, Bronwyn, thank you. And thank you all for participating in this hour. We hope that you found it really useful. Very conscious of the fact that there's a lot of people out there who've not had an opportunity to ask their questions. So if you have got a question and you'd like to have it answered, please email the team and we'll do our best to come back to you as soon as we can. But thank you. There's the links if you want to send in a question. Thanks for participating. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it valuable. And let's all keep working together to make the cities of the world collaborate and produce a better future for all our citizens, all our cities, and for our planet. Thanks very much for participating in this today. And we hope you'll keep in touch with what we're doing in the future as the World Cities Culture Forum. Goodbye.